Donald Trump has suggested that some U.S. TV networks should have their broadcasting licenses revoked over hosts who criticize him. His comments come after U.S. broadcaster ABC pulled talk show Jimmy Kimmel Live off air following the comedian's comments about the killing of right-wing political activist Charlie Kirk. Kimmel suggested that the suspect in the slaying was actually a pro-Trump Republican, and he accused the administration of exploiting the killing for politics.
Jimmy Kimmel is the host of one of the most popular US talk shows. He's usually responsible for late-night laughs, but his studio has been silenced after a comment he made suggesting the killer of right-wing activist Charlie Kirk was a Trump supporter.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
The chair of the US Federal Communications Commission said Kimmel had shown the, quote, sickest conduct possible in his Monday monologue and said his network should take action. The FCC is responsible for issuing TV licenses in the US, and the chairperson suggested those could be at risk for stations playing Kimmel's show. Hours later, ABC announced it would pull the show for the foreseeable future. Kimmel himself, seen here in the black cap, was whisked away from the studio, leaving audience members to be turned away from Wednesday night's recording.
The show was about to start in like 45 minutes, and we were still like all outside. So it was very like suspicious that something was going on, but we didn't know what it was.
Any show that's on TV that speaks out against Donald Trump, he's trying to shut down.
I'm devastated. I'm really upset. This is free speech. We are supposed to have free speech in this country.
Left-wing Hollywood heavyweights and politicians alike are ringing the alarm bells for what they say is a threat to free speech in America. California Governor Gavin Newsom called the move coordinated and dangerous, while journalist Don Lemon said the decision should send chills down everyone's spine. President Trump celebrated the decision as great news for America and congratulated ABC for being courageous. It's unclear when or if Jimmy Kimmel Live will be back on air.
David Kaye is a professor of law at the University of California, and he joins me now from Irvine in California. David, welcome. ABC made this decision on its own, but after an overt threat from the head of the U.S. broadcast regulator, the FCC. From a legal standpoint, would the FCC really have had a case against Kimmel based on what you've seen, based on these comments?
No, absolutely not. I think one of the things that we can see in this case, which I want to put into a broader perspective, but in this particular specific case, essentially the FCC is simply saying via a threat that Jimmy Kimmel was speaking in a way that was against the public interest. That's simply too broad as a measure of what the FCC can do in order to regulate the airways in the United States.
Why wouldn't ABC have challenged this? This is obviously a decision by a company, but looking at it, if they had a legal case, why not pursue it?
I mean, it's a great question. I mean, at the moment, I think one of the things that we're seeing is a vast repression of democratic society in the United States. And we see it at the universities, we see it against journalism, we see it in all sorts of ways. And ABC, facing this direct threat from the president of the United States, probably saw that it was going to face some serious consequences. Now, that is not to say that it did the right thing. It clearly would have been in the right to say, we're not going to do that. This is beyond the power of the federal government to threaten us and to make us do this. And they didn't do that.
Conservatives have said that the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, they've accused it of being weaponized in past administrations against conservative outlets. Is this an organization, an agency that can be used as a kind of bludgeon when an administration wants it to use it that way?
Look, I think that Republicans in the past have essentially argued that even the FCC or the federal government's engagement with private actors, even when it was arguing, for example, that there needed to be certain kinds of attention to public health issues, for example, COVID during the pandemic, the Republicans basically argued that that kind of, in retrospect, quite modest statements of what they wanted, different actors to do, particularly social media, it looks really quaint at this point, because what we're seeing from Brendan Carr, the head of the FCC, and from the President of the United States is continual pressure on the media. And we see it, I think it's really important to see this in the broader context of what's happening in the United States right now, because the president recently sued the New York Times for $15 billion. The federal government is putting inordinate pressure on universities. It's attempting to destroy public media, both national public radio and public broadcasting service. So all of these things and many others are combining to really demonstrate that this administration is seeking to undermine not just freedom of expression in this country, but generally speaking, they're seeking to undermine the possibility of debate, of criticism, even of satire of the president. And the president has made very clear that he got what he wanted out of these threats.
All right, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there for now. David Kaye, professor of law at the University of California. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Seth Stern is director of advocacy at the Freedom of the Press Foundation in the U.S. He joins us now for more. Seth, first of all, what is your reaction to Jimmy Kimmel's suspension?
Well, it's an escalation of the kind of censorship we've seen from the Trump administration and specifically from the Federal Communications Commission under its chair, Brendan Carr. We've already seen this idea floated, which is already absurd, that the public interest requirement under the FCC allows interference with editorial slant. We haven't seen a claim that the FCC is entitled to line-by-line review of a few words that came out of a late-night comedian's mouth to gauge whether it's in the public interest and that a network will face retribution if Brendan Carr determines it's not.
Right. The Federal Communications Commission is the FCC. It regulates broadcast licenses, in this case for ABC and for other networks. President Trump commented on the case during his state visit to the UK. Let's have a quick listen at what he said, and then we'll continue.
Well, Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else, and he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago. So, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent.
I don't think anyone here is arguing that ratings were really behind this, but Kimmel did claim that the killer was actually a right-wing extremist, for which there is no evidence so far. Could one not argue that that's an egregious statement in the current environment following Kirk's death, and that ABC, in this case, was forced to take action?
Well, Donald Trump has an enormous platform as the president of the United States and the most powerful person in the world. If he takes issue with something Jimmy Kimmel says, he can take to his Truth Social account, his X account, or any of his various other megaphones and speak his mind. That's the way we deal with disagreement in the United States. If he has a valid cause of action for defamation, he has access to the courts. We do not deal with false speech, with disagreeable speech, even with extreme speech by government pressure to censor. That's un-American and unconstitutional.
Could ABC not legally challenge any sort of effort by the FCC to oust Jimmy Kimmel, to discipline Jimmy Kimmel and the show? Just to be clear, ABC went ahead and acted before the head of the FCC did anything. But in theory, this could be a case that they would win, correct?
Well, I think ABC is in somewhat of a bind here. because it is dependent on the owners of its local affiliates, which are highly consolidated in the United States, to broadcast the shows that it airs. Nexstar and Sinclair own a majority of local ABC affiliates. Nexstar has business before the FCC, a merger it is looking to complete, much like Paramount did when it caved to Trump. So if those affiliates won't broadcast Jimmy Kimmel's show, ABC is out of luck. So you've got a situation where the only people who have standing for legal recourse are the same people who are being intimidated and bullied in the first place.
Do you believe, as California Governor Gavin Newsom wrote, that this is a coordinated effort by the Trump administration, that we'll see more of this kind of pressure?
I don't have any reason to think we wouldn't see more. We've been seeing it from the beginning of the administration, Paramount being the leading example, where Brendan Carr used his leverage as the head of the agency that needed to approve the Paramount Skydance merger to extract a $16 million settlement of Trump's frivolous private lawsuit, as well as numerous other concessions. The FCC is using its merger approval authority, the other leverage it has, to extract censorship, money, and compliance from licensees. That's been happening for some time. I have no reason to think that won't continue to happen.
All right, that's Seth Stern from the Freedom of the Press Foundation. Seth, thank you.
Thanks for having me.